So Orb's going to take us into some more training and helping us tame that terminal. So Orb, it's your turn.
Okay, let's see here. Get this over here. Get this over here. How's that?
Looks good.
So in recognition of console work, the slides are all black and white, and we have a serif font. These are going to be commands that will let you dig in and find out what all the hardware is in your computer. The interesting thing about these workshops, I've been using Linux since like forever, and in prepping for all of these, I always learn something new, and this one's no exception. So anyway, these are the commands we're going to go over. You'll notice they all start with ls, or most of them anyway. The bare ls command, which we've gone over before, is to list files. I don't know if you knew or not, in Bash, the console terminal, you can type a couple letters if you're not sure what the name of the command is, and then hit tab twice, and it will list you all of the executable programs that start with those letters. So if I typed ls and hit tab, it would show me all of these, the ls PCI, LSHW, and all that stuff. So anyway, if you type LSHW, you get several screens full of information, which may or may not be what you want. You can pipe them to more and look at them one page at a time. I found this shorter version, not a shorter version, but it's got switches to show you what you need to know. The dash short, pipe to head, and if you don't recall, head will show you by default the first 10 lines and stop. But the dash N6 says, show me the first 6 lines, and you get a nice little summary of my system, which is a Dell XPS 8940, the bus, which I have no idea what that means. The BIOS is 64 kibibytes, that's KIB, instead of kilobytes, and 16 gigs of RAM, gigabytes. So that's kind of useful. For those of you who aren't real familiar with computer hardware, everybody knows what the USB is, Universal Serial Bus. You can think of that as the external bus on your computer for things you can plug in. The internal bus is the PCI bus, and we'll look at that in a minute. Anyway, LSUSB will let you know all of the USB devices, and what's helpful is to run this, then plug in your USB device, and then run the command again and make sure your USB device appears. On the left is the bus, and there are multiple buses. Right now, you can see most of the stuff is on bus 001, and in this case, one of them is on bus 002, and they all have device IDs after that. Also, you may remember that Ethernet ports have a MAC address, media access control, and it's a hexadecimal number, and the first half of it is always unique to a vendor. Well, USB is the same. You'll notice the first listing, the Linux Foundation root hub, and down at the bottom of Linux Foundation 2.0 root hub, both have a USB ID starting with 1D6B. So apparently that's the vendor cookie or what have you for the USB devices. We don't have any other duplicates there because they're all made from different vendors. You don't normally need to use this, but from time to time you'll install a program and it has a configuration file that needs to be modified, so you tell it which port it's coming in on, and if it happens to be a USB port, you'd need this command to ascertain which port it is, and then you would modify that configuration file accordingly. There's that infamous LSPCI. It's pretty dense here. The LSPCI-M is the friendly version. But you'll notice there's also LSPCI buses here, the first 2 digits. And most of them are on the 0 bus. I got a couple on 2 and 3. The PCI bus, there are plug-in sockets for PCI devices to plug into your computer, but as more and more devices are integrated onto the motherboard, they obviously don't need a connector to plug into, but they still have to have a place on a PCI bus so the CPU can address them. And you can see here, a lot of these are from Intel, and there are a lot of, because Dell uses a lot of Intel components. That wouldn't necessarily be the case if you had an Asus laptop. And by the way, I don't know of any laptops that have PCI connections on them. They're all built into the motherboard. A lot of fairly obtuse, obscure-looking stuff here. But it's useful to look it over. And if you ever needed to know what PCI components were on your computer, this would be the command to do it. LS CPU, all about your CPU chip. And again, it's very, very verbose. So you pipe it to more, and the first page is really all you need to see. Down at the bottom, you can see flags. Those are the various CPU register flags, and there are dozens and dozens of them, and you don't need to concern yourself. What's useful here is it is a 64-bit computer that supports 32-bit operands, the computer commands, and the byte order is Little Endian as opposed to Big Endian, which is getting more and more rare. All that means is the least significant bit comes first. In other words, looking at it as a number, you'd read it right to left to read the whole command, but it's presented internally left to right. What's the most useful part here is the model. This is it's about a year-old Dell desktop here, and it's got a nice i7 11700 CPU at 2.5 gigs. Sometimes that's useful for comparing motherboards. Uname is pretty boring. If you just type it, it just says, yeah, you're Unix or Linux. It could come up with Unix or Linux, depending on which operating system you're using. In our case, it'll always be Linux. The more interesting version is uname-a down at the bottom. It's Linux. W6bi-house-PC is the host name of this computer, which really isn't very useful unless it's on a network and you need to get to it from another computer. You would SSH into it. And this particular one has Core 5.15. And it's a Ubuntu. SMP means symmetric multiprocessing. And that used to be, in the early days, a big deal. That was when Linux gained the capability to manage multiple CPUs, multiprocessing. That was a long time ago. It's pretty much the default anymore. I don't know why they still bother to put it in there. June 6, 2310 UTC was when this kernel was last compiled. And all the other stuff is, yeah, it handles 64-bit stuff, and it's GNU/Linux. The diehard Linux geeks will refer to Linux as GNU/Linux. GNU stands for GNU's not Unix. If you didn't know already, it's sort of a play on words, a recursion. Many of the utilities that come with your Linux distribution are from the GNU Foundation. they maintain a lot of those utilities. And because they got combined, rolled into every Linux distribution, they insist it should be GNU/Linux, and vast majority of Linux users say, yeah, whatever. fdisk is the command to either look at or edit disks. fdisk -L will show you all of the devices that it considers block devices. And every snap device now uses an internal mount called a loop mount to mount its container. And if you do an fdisk -L, you'll see a ton of those, which are really not very interesting. But if you go down farther in there, you'll finally find your true storage disk. In this case, it's an NVMe drive, which we talked about last time, non-volatile memory. You might have a SDA or an SDB, or if it's really, really old, HDA or HDB. I don't know if anybody even runs those anymore. Anyway, almost every desktop that has an NVMe drive on it will only have one, and it's always NVMe 0. The N1 is namespace 1. I learned this in prepping for the last presentation, that NVMEs can have multiple namespaces. You won't ever see them on a desktop Linux, but it's good to know what they are. And I learned that more and more block devices are taking up namespaces for more complex installation. Anyway, this is a 238.47 gigabytes. There's the total number of bytes there and sectors, and tells you the brand and model, which is useful. Going down a little farther, the disk label is GPT. There is a program called PartEd that it's partition editor, which is a newer version of fdisk. You can use it to list all disks. I list all disks. Anyway, this is formatted as a GPT disk, which is how they identify them all now. The disk identifier is there. It's a long hexadecimal number. Sometimes you will see them mounted like that instead of /dev/something. Fedora does that. Anyway, down at the bottom, you can see there's 3 partitions, P1, P2, and P3, and the start and end. And off to the right, there's a BIOS partition, the EFI system, and then the rest of it's left over for Linux, the 238 gigs. But fdisk -L is handy for quick and dirty to see what you've got on there. Which it will tell you where your executable is. Executables can be in 2 or 3, maybe 4 common locations. And when you type it on the command line, it will search through all of those in the search path. User bin, sometimes it's /bin, /user/local/bin. And if you're not sure where it's at, you just type which. You see I type which Mattermost, and it's in user local bin. I type which Firefox, and you can see it's in the snap directory because it's a snap container, snap bin. I typed which Chrome and got no results because the name of the program is actually Google-Chrome. So if I type which Google-Chrome, you'd see it's in user/bin. Nice to know. And by the way, you will get if you're logged in as root, you'll get a different search path as opposed to when you're logged in as your ordinary user, because there is a /sbin directory where executables that are intended for system administration are kept. Uptime. How long have I been up? It's been up 4 hours and 45 minutes, 3 years load average, blah, 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 blah. The -P switch, you can see their uptime -P is the pretty version. It just says up 4 hours and 45 minutes. I learned that in preparing this presentation. I'd never seen -P before. Okay, this is going to be a shorter presentation because I didn't want to drowned you in details, but you know, there's more than one way to do something. There is a program called Hard Info, which is not installed by default. And you can see the command there to install it. It's pretty easy. Sudo app -y install hard info, poof, done. And it's not command line. It's a GUI. And it shows everything that I've showed you plus lots more. So sometimes the GUI is better. This is on the list. On the left side, you can see a list of all the things you can see, and I didn't show it, but if you click on each one of them, it will drill down and show you what's in that category. And in some cases, you can drill down into that. I should have done that. But in any case, you can see that there's a scroll bar here. But wait, there's more. So if you scroll down, you see this. I happened to click on sensors, and it started recording this zone 0 temp 1. 27 degrees C. These two, just to look at them here, most of these are situated on the motherboard. This 27 degrees is probably in the cooler open air there. And also the fans, it shows that there. So that shows that you can click on any one of these and see what's going on. Also down here, I didn't look at them, but these are benchmarks for CPU performance. You can click on one of these and it'll show you, these are artificial benchmarks, how well it does in crypto, how well it does calculating a Fibonacci function, how well zlib, how well it does in compressing a file. Those aren't hardware. Well, they're benchmarks for your hardware, but they're CPU performance, except for the bottom, which is floating point. That's really all I have. I didn't want to overwhelm you with little itty bitty commands, but that's a good overview there. Any questions? Actually, let me see if I can do.
Again, I do not have any questions.
Okay.
You guys are really getting good at it with your presentations and explaining everything.
Well, this one's kind of, okay, here's the live thing. Let's try operating system. More information that you want to know about your operating system. Load average, uptime, all that good stuff. Printers. I only have one called Office. It's an Office Jet 6978. Input devices. Ooh, look at all of those. Oh, and network stuff. Here's the interfaces. Your loop back. There's my Ethernet interface with its MAC address and its IP address. IP connections, yeah. Every computer has multiple connections ongoing, depending on what you got doing. USB, PCI, memory. Got a nice graph of memory utilization down at the bottom. A lot of this memory stuff is how the kernel allocates memory, and it's really esoteric. I think pretty much all you need to know is, yeah, I've got some memory and I'm not swapping. Oh, last boots. There you go. 21st, 16. I turn my computer off every night just to save wear and tear. I'm done.
Thank you.
You know, that's exactly, you know, what I've wanted in this whole thing is easy things to try. And you can get good at the command line if you just pick and choose some of these simple, easy things to do that gets you more comfortable. And obviously you get to see how powerful it is and brings up information. And as Orv said, Hard Info is a tremendous program. There is a program similar to that in Windows. And when people know about that program, then they always say, well, it'd be nice if Linux had one like this that would tell you everything. And the answer is, yeah, we do. And it it should be a program that's on your computer to give you all that information. So, you know, take some of these little commands that Orv's given you and try them out. If he gave them to you, you're not going to do any damage to your computer. So go ahead and try it and see what it does. And you know, when we do things like that, make directory, boy, that is just so easy to make directories in your computer with that. Judy?
What is the name of the GUI hardware program?
Hard info.
Oh, I wrote that down already. I answered it. See how good you are?
Yeah, and it's an easy install. And it's quick with that. You probably could go to the software center and go looking for it. But as we're hoping to let you know that if you know the program you want, just throw that terminal open, sudo apt install, and the Y is optional. And the name hard info, and boom, it's downloaded, and then it's a GUI to run. So.
Mark.
Let me find Mark here.
John will unmute you.
Yeah, just as long as it's in that person that just joined. There we go.
Okay, now I got it. Does that work on all distros?
If it's in the repository, it should work, yes.
Yeah, it installed, but it doesn't seem to give me very much information like what you had.
The hard
Ooh.
info?
Yeah, like I clicked on it and it doesn't show anything beside it.
Is it showing up? Is it showing up in your menu?
Is it in the menu?
Yeah. Since it's a GUI, you should be able to find it there. Could be under systems.
It says run hard info. Is that the one?
You can try that. Did you install it as root?
Oh no. I did sudo before I did it.
Okay, that should work.
So when I run it, the thing is there, but when I went down to the sensors, there's nothing. It says cooling fans, temperatures, and voltage values, but it doesn't, there's nothing under any of them. I can't double click it or anything.
It could be that the packages to monitor sensors aren't installed by default. I've had this machine up for so long. Just do a Google search for whatever your distro is, install sensors or something like that.
I'll take a look at it there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if I was doing something wrong.
We hope not. We hope not.
Hope not too. Thank you.
Hey, John, is my share stopped?
Especially John, since you just said go ahead and try anything that Orv taught today.
Yeah. You're not sharing now, Orv. You can share again.
It says stop share, but I guess it did. No, I don't need to.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you so much on that. And if there is something that you would like to know that you could try doing in the command line, you can send it to us and I'll forward it to Orv, and he'll kind of decide whether it's something that we aren't ready for yet or something that, you know, that we could do. One of these times I'm anxious to take you through creating aliases, because I've learned how to do that and it's not that hard and it really has some benefits. So if there's something that you think that you'd like to know about the command line, I know that later on we can go into writing some scripts that you can be able to link a number of commands together and have something simple do it. But Orv's bringing us along just right in getting you out into the water, testing the water, and not going under.